Hello, everyone. This is Raise Your Voice as part of the Fans First Sports Network. We are live on youtube.com/at Raise Your Voice and also available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you can join us every time we go live. And if you really want to say thank you, you can head on over to patreon.com/Raise Your Voice, where you can become a member for as little as $1 a month. Darby, we're going to get to the Rays talk, but I want to start off this week's episode with Bucks Minute. I've got my nice Tampa Bay Bucks quarter zip that my good friend Jamie Buck gifted to me. I know he is a longtime listener of the show. But the Bucks are now 8-6. Huge road win over the Chargers yesterday, 40-17. The Bucks are road warriors. They're 5-2 on the road, back in first place in the NFC South. What are your thoughts on where the grass rays are these days?
This was the big. I think this was the big game. Like this week against the Chargers on the road. I mean, you look ahead. This was the toughest game in the second half schedule for the Bucks by a large margin. The Chargers have been playing really well and really well on defense. So to see what the Bucks did in this game, I mean, like Herbert's had a really good season. They were showing the stats in the game, like hadn't had an interception in his last, I forget how many throws. It was a lot. And then two yesterday, a huge game. And for both sides, the defense came up massive. The offense was, again, another masterclass. And against this Chargers defense, against a Harbaugh-led defense, pick a Harbaugh. They got good defenses. They know that side of the ball really well. That was a incredibly impressive performance by the Bucks. I think it's their most complete game of the season. I mean, I think you have some really good wins early on against like Detroit, against Washington. But this, I think, was like the like truly like all sides of the ball really played their best, and it was encouraging because the end of the first half of the season before the bye, I should say, not even the first half, what you saw was the Bucks just finding ways to lose, huge mental mistakes, huge, like just simple stuff failing, bad defense, bad tackling, bad zones, horrific defensive scheming, really, really bad plays, like really figuring out like what is the minimum they can do to like lose. This was like the opposite. They like just kind of kept putting it on, and really impressive game. And now you really are seeing, like with Atlanta kind of dropping a couple games there, that advantage that they had, the tiebreaker, really fantastic job for the Bucks to get this win and now control their own destiny, right? You have three teams that you should beat. You win all three of those games. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. Doesn't matter what Atlanta does. You're winning the NFC South again. Can you? For me, what's wild to watch the Bucks, and I have not gotten used to this, even after watching Tom Brady for a few years. It is very strange for me to just be like, hope the defense does something, like just doesn't kill us, and then just get the ball to the offense because I know something good is going to be happen. Can you talk about like this weird feeling as a Bucks fan that like everything on offense just is amazing?
Well, it's
must watch television.
Yeah, it's two things. The first is Liam Cohen. Like Dave Canales. I kind of liked his offense. I thought there were some flaws in it, but I like Dave Canales. And you lose him to the Panthers after 1 year. And I'll be honest, I'm a little worried that Liam Cohen's stay in Tampa Bay is going to be a short one. If there is, unless for whatever reason he gets promoted to head coach. I know that's something that you and I have talked about throughout the season. But I'm a little worried we might lose him. Second thing is you've got a first ballot Hall of Famer back healthy wide receiver, Mike Evans, who his pursuit of a 10th straight 1,000-yard receiving season is back on after a massive game yesterday. 2 touchdown catches, 159 yards on 9 receptions. Mike Evans, I mean, he is just a true Hall of Famer and looks like he'll play his entire career with the Bucks, which is just incredible. Also, it's really refreshing for the first time in a long time. Like, Brady, when you had Tom Brady, like you knew that was going to be a short-term relationship. It ended up being 3 seasons, and you made the postseason all 3 of those years. Obviously, you won a Super Bowl, you won 2 division titles, but you knew that wasn't going to go forever because of his age. And I'm not saying the Baker Mayfield thing is going to, go on for 8+ seasons, but it does feel nice, like having a guy who, even with his flaws, like that he is the Bucs starting quarterback, and that he is the Bucs starting quarterback going into next year. And there's no question. There's no like 2 different sides of the fan base that want to, like, we saw like pretty much for after the first year or 2 of Jameis, that was always the question. Like, okay, are the Bucs going to try to replace him? And then you had the year with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think it's just so reassuring as a Bucs fan to know, like, Baker Mayfield is our guy. He's our quarterback, no matter what. He can have a really bad game this week, but he's our guy going into next week. He's had a bit of a bumpy year. The turnovers have started to show up a little bit more, but a really solid road performance to put up, like you said, 40 points on a Jim Harbaugh defense. Like that is just it's incredible. And the Bucs, like, I trust them more on the road more than I do at home right now, and that's something to say. Did we lose Darby? He's stuck in his shocked face. Okay, we might have lost Darby for a second. We'll wait for him to come back. Moving on to Rays talk. Might just need to take Darby off the screen here for a second. Moving on to Rays talk. The Rays have traded left-handed pitcher. Oh, now we got him back. Here he is.
I'm back. Yeah.
Okay. The Rays have traded left-handed pitcher Jeffrey Springs to the Athletics. Is that what they're called? The Athletics, like
still the Athletics?
Is it just the Athletics? Anyway,
I think it's like Athletics Baseball Club of Sacramento. Could they do that?
Sacramento.
Could they steal an Angels?
The Rays trade one of their starters.
I'm not used to the ATH, like that. Like on roster resource or like fantasy. Yeah, that little acronym. I'm like still like, what is that?
I think they should just change their name, honestly. Before we'll get into this trade, that change the name, honestly, just the A's, like not even the Athletics. I think just the A's. That's what most people call them. Anyways, Jeffrey Springs. We talked about a potential trade last week, and the Rays had 7 certified starting pitchers going into next year. That probably wasn't going to work, so they needed to trade one. We talked about 2 main candidates being Zach Littell and Jeffrey Springs. Jeffrey Springs makes sense. I think for a lot of reasons for the Rays. He was going to be one of the ones that was going to be on an innings limit. He came back from Tommy John last year, actually had to be shut down in September, which was, precautionary, maybe planned, but still a little worrying, and was definitely going to be on some sort of workload limit going into this season. He was also going to be the highest paid pitcher in this rotation. And you look at, I don't know. My projections of Jeffrey Springs are, I think, down a little bit after his comeback next year. I don't think he's going to be a bad pitcher. I think he's going to be a really good pitcher. I think it speaks to how good this Rays rotation is. But I might project 3 or maybe even 4 starters to be better than Jeffrey Springs. And so you look at a guy who's making that much money, who's going to be on an innings limit, and you just needed to trade a starter who could get a really good return. I think Jeffrey Springs made a lot of sense for all of those reasons for the Rays. Which is why he got a good return. But before we get into the return, Darby, I am a little sad about losing Jeffrey Springs because, reminder, we got him back in a trade for Ronaldo Hernandez. You turned Ronaldo Hernandez into 2 guys that were DFA'd by Boston, Jeffrey Springs and Chris Mazza. And Springs, was a nice little lefty reliever, could go multiple innings, had a really bad knee injury one year, but then all of a sudden blossomed into one of the best left-handed starting pitchers in all of baseball. I mean, what are you going to miss most about Jeffrey Springs?
Truly out of nowhere. Like, I feel like that was one of the most, we talk about like the Rays pitching lab kind of coming up with some amazing results. That is, I think, maybe maybe their best of all time. I really enjoyed watching Springs pitch because that changeup just truly next level. Strike thrower, worked fast, and really good K stuff. It was so, I think with Springs too, the fact that it was such a, when the trade happened, I was really excited because I thought he had that change up, that kind of makeup. I was like, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting reliever. Like, I think the Rays could do some stuff. When he became a starter and just started to, like, crush it, it was all found money. It was like not even finding a 20 in it was like $100 bill, like crumpled up in your jeans. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. So every start really felt like magical. But there was always that sense of like, is this real? Like all the underlying peripherals were great. Like, so it was very, very well earned, but it was just so shocking. But yeah, I'm going to miss him spinning that changeup mostly. I think he is a really fun pitcher to watch. I think Oakland got a really good pitcher, and it's just a great story too. Like, you really want to see Jeffrey Springs kind of succeed, because he was kind of just a journeyman guy, right? Like, DFA'd from the Rangers, DFA'd from the Red Sox, and like, just to see him, get that opportunity and then not just succeed, but like thrive. It's next level pitcher. Like, he had his results in a very small sample size because of injuries, really rank him in like the top 10 of all pitchers in baseball, like by results. So if he can do that long term and stay healthy, and that's the true him, then like what an amazing find. But we'll see.
I think that's the question. I think part of the debate is what's the sustainability of taking these. Now, Jeffrey Springs had been a starter in the minor leagues, but then it's been a few years in the majors as a reliever. What is the impact on these pitchers' arms when you do this, make this change? At the end of the day, that could be the slogan for our podcast. Pitchers are going to get hurt. I'm not saying that that's the reason he got Tommy John. There are plenty of guys who have only started that have gotten Tommy John. There are plenty of guys who have only thrown out of the pen who have gotten Tommy John. But I do think there is a little bit of question over, like, okay, is this good for arm health, making that switch and doing it pretty quickly? Springs now moving into his 30s. The fastball lost velocity last year. It was only 3 starts.
Yeah.
So usually you need a little bit more time to build back up. Then he was shut down. I think you can believe that Jeffrey Springs is going to be a good enough pitcher to remain in a rotation for at least a few more years. But I think there are some worrying things about him moving forward. Just any pitcher is a gamble. Springs might be a little bit more of a gamble from here on out.
There was a lot of risk and a lot of red flags with Springs coming into this season. Not so much that I think he was like somebody that you just like had to move, but I definitely think everything baked in, he definitely made a lot of sense as a guy that you want to move early. I think you mentioned it, like a little loss in velo coming back. First year back from major arm surgery, Tommy John, like that stuff, it takes time. So, next year, hopefully we'll see a boost. We've seen that with a lot of pitchers. But yeah, there is just that underlying concern, right? Of like, is that for real? What was the 2022 like for real? Was the glimpse in 2023, the first few starts, for real? Will he get back to that coming back? So you have the small sample size of, was that for real originally? 2, you have the question of reliever to starter again, like, can he stay healthy? And then 3, you have a 32-year-old pitcher coming back from arm reconstructive surgery.
Right.
Can he be as effective? You combine all of those together, and there is like a pretty big risk that's going into that. I think if you're Oakland, I don't know, they're kind of doing some interesting stuff. Like, they're actually kind of building a pretty decent looking team over there in a very weird way. But if you're the Rays, I think overall, I'm going to miss. I think there's 2 things. I'm going to miss Jeffrey Springs, but I'm also pretty elated about the trade. And I think that dichotomy, I guess, is like how you are a Rays fan, is that you have to be happy with like that, is root for Jeffrey Springs' success, but also be pretty excited about like this return.
Yeah, I want to, and we're going to dig into the return. I do like Lego's comment here. Garrett Clevenger, starting pitcher. I could see it. Again, I don't know if I love like the idea of just continuously taking relievers and turning them into starters, but Garrett Clevenger, I do think, is the pitch mix to make it work. Jeffrey Springs isn't the only player the Rays lost in this. Jacob Lopez also was sent to the A's as part of this deal. Left-handed starter / swingman that had pitched for the Rays a little bit this year and spent most of the year in AAA Durham. I think Lopez is a guy that has a little bit 6'4", nice, like built like a true like left-handed starting pitcher. Has some potential. Had a lot of success throughout the Rays system. I think one year, am I making this up, that he was like the minor league pitcher of the year in the Rays system? It might have been 2023 actually. But came up and I guess only 10 in the third innings for the Rays. I thought he had a little bit more this year, but filled in when they needed him, when they were running low on arms. A guy that, again, with this crowded rotation, just wasn't going to have a shot with the Rays unless there were numerous injuries. So Jacob Lopez hopefully gets a shot in with the A's to crack in and get some more big league playing time. But Darby, I do want to get into the return now. I think this is a very interesting return. I think this is ultimately a fair trade. I think both teams can get a lot out of this. Totally. But I want to start with the main piece of this deal, or maybe I disagree that it's the main piece, but he is the most recognizable name. He's the only player in the big leagues as part of this return. Joe Boyle, starting pitcher, 6'7", 240 pounds, can throw it very, very hard. I'm a little bit skeptical about the command. He had maybe the worst command in all of baseball last year.
You're skeptical of 7 walks per 9?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. 7.5 walks per 9. Like this is closer to 8. It was closer to 8 than it was 7. It was a 17.7% walk rate. But the stuff is clearly there. So Darby, Jamie's in the chat now. Joe Boyle, Hive assemble. Go ahead, sell me on Joe Boyle.
Yeah, I was most excited about Joe Boyle in this trade for sure. Here's the thing. Kyle Snyder is a tall, lanky pitcher. He was a tall, lanky major league pitcher. He is the best probably pitching coach in all of Major League Baseball. And he is seemingly exceptionally good at helping tall, lanky pitchers figure out how to control their awkward, freakish bodies. Pitching is mechanics and like motion and repeatability. And with pitching like that, like when you are 6'7", there's just so much more to like get into rhythm. And watching Joe Boyle, I kind of watched some starts. I rewatched the start against the Rays, which he did really well. I rewatched the start against the Mets, which he did not do very well. And you can basically, I was getting into this like mode of just like basically pausing it every single time he had his plant foot land, and then just guessing like, does he come anywhere close to the catcher's target or not? And pretty reliably, you could just tell right from the plant, like whether that was going to go anywhere close. And it's just all over the place. Like, I think he mechanically was also tweaking some stuff. There is stuff to work on, right? We saw Tyler Glasnow is a Cy Young contender every single year. But Tyler Glasnow, when he was traded in the Chris Archer trade, was a failed prospect who is no longer a starter and now just struggling in middle relief for the Pirates. And that's what he was. And when he came over, I think a lot of Rays fans were like, oh, former good prospect, but like probably just like could be the next, Pete Fairbanks, could be the next like fire thrower in the pen. I don't think anybody could have expected.
Me included. And I even liked, even with Glasnow as a reliever, I liked that Archer return. I was like, man, Glasnow could be the best closer in baseball. And you've also got Austin Meadows and Shane Baz. Like, that's still a great return. But I was very wrong about that.
And the easy comp for Boyle is to Glasnow, right? Tall, lanky, neat, horrible command. Boyle's is much worse than Glasnow's was, like much, much worse. But like unbelievable stuff, right? His fastball is electric, touches 102 on Saris's Stuff Plus model. It is for his 2 very brief major league seasons is at a 110 Stuff Plus, so about 10% above average. His slider is insane. Last year was at 149, which would have been, I think, in the top 30 of all sliders in baseball, including relievers. And his cutter, which he kind of has a sweeper and a slider that's more of a gyro action. That kind of slider gyro action is really, really good. That's the one that I think is like top notch. But yeah, Stuff Plus by model last year or in 2023 was 132. Last year was 122. Really good stuff. The problem is his location. Like last year in particular was a mess. So he is mostly he's not so much a pitcher that I'm saying like you need to refine his pitches. You need to he needs to add a changeup. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. It really is mechanical. It is a mess. Like he needs to fix those mechanics, get more repeatability in that, and kind of get his body working for him. Now, while it's an easy comp to Glasnow, you can't just say like, okay, well, great. Kyle Snyder can just fix him, and Joe Boyle is going to be a Cy Young contender and a top 5 pitcher in all of baseball. But that is the upside. Like that is not a unrealistic potential outcome. It's a 95th percentile outcome for sure. It is the best outcome, but that is not an unreasonable ceiling for Boyle. And so you are taking a risk in Jeffrey Springs that has all these other risks. You're trading it in for a grab bag of risks. Boyle, the stuff is there, the mechanics are not. Couple of things, and I sent it in the chat if you want to bring it up for our visual folks that are watching us live. We have one from Cameron Levy, who's a really good follow if you aren't. In the second half last year, Joe Boyle's fastball had the biggest increase in basically rise. His fastball and when we talk about rising in fastballs, it is basically falling slower. So it is not physically rising, but it is not dropping as much as you would expect as a batter, which means it almost feels like it is rising. Not only was it the biggest increase in the second half, it was the flooring. That line at the top that's way over, way that was where he was going. Logan Gilbert was second, and that's kind of one of his big carrying traits, right? Is that fastball that can just sit at the top of the zone, seemingly rise, and just get those strikeouts. And when you pair that with his slider, his gyro slider that kind of starts and then drops off the table, you can get some really nasty swings and misses. We saw that when the Rays went to Oakland, and he kind of sliced and diced him really well. He works some great at bats against Yandy Diaz. And Yandy Diaz is somebody that knows the zone better than umpires. So that was really encouraging to see. But there is a lot of outcomes where he doesn't get there. The other one I wanted to show was Cole, Rays Metrics, at Rays Metrics, but Cole, our buddy Cole here. There was some mechanical stuff that they were doing in Oakland. And I'll be curious to see what Snyder does, whether he continues to go with it or not. Cole had two sort of images back to back. His arm slot lowered quite a bit, so that increased with basically potentially that rising fastball action, or that perceived rising fastball action. But it also kind of hurt a lot of his command. So he had much better command in 2023 than he did in 2024. But also if he is tinkering with his mechanics, that can also be a factor in that. Having him now to go through a full spring and then probably start the year in Durham to kind of work on some stuff more, that gives just so much more time for Snyder and the Rays pitching staff to kind of help him kind of get his body right, figure out where on the rubber, where is his arm slot, where is his load, where are these things, where does his body need to be to effectively be a little bit more in command. He may not turn into a guy that's David Price in his prime, where he just decided to never throw balls anymore. But you don't need to be a guy. You can walk quite a few people and you can be wild, but you can do it effectively when you throw
Blake
more
Snell.
strikes.
Blake Snell.
Blake Snell is a great example. 2 Cy Youngs with a guy who Blake Snell has.
He throws balls on purpose.
Better command. Yeah, he has better command. He just doesn't like to throw strikes. When you have the stuff like Boyle does, you can miss pretty easily in the zone, but that's okay, and you can get away with it.
Right.
Having the confidence. This was something we were chatting with Brian Menendez in the Slack chat, but he's a former pitcher, and he was also talking about how like there's a difference between saying throw strikes and having the confidence to feel like you can throw it down the middle. And that's what the Rays do, right? They say like throw it down the middle, throw it single zone, like let your own movement kind of take it. But we want you to throw it down the middle. If you miss, that's fine. If you get tagged, that's fine. Like we think if you can keep doing that long term, it's going to succeed. And that's where that Snyder, I think, really works well, is there's a holistic method where he is building that confidence in a player to believe in themselves, to want to do that, to challenge over the middle.
Looking at Joe Boyle's his Baseball Savant page, he's like 84th percentile in whiff rate, and then like first percentile in chase rate, chase percentage. Yes. So like that shows like there's a way to fix this. Is he going to be, Tyler Glasnow? Probably not. And I'm not as high on Boyle as I think a lot of Rays fans are, and luckily the people that are higher on him than me are a lot smarter than me when it comes to evaluating pitchers. So I'm that makes me excited. But I think even if Boyle, even if someone's not high on Boyle, you can be high on this return. Like if Boyle works out, even if it's as like a back end starter or a high end reliever, this could be the Rays could win this trade in a landslide, right? Not only do you have Jacob Waters, who is another pitcher who Eric Neander came out and said, like in an he was quoted in the Tampa Bay Times in a Mark Topkin article saying, like our development team just flagged this guy, so we took him. And so I'm like, okay, sounds good. Will Simpson, right-handed hitting, like sounds like corner outfielder, first base, but can really hit it. Has hit
poor man's Trey Mancini type of prospect.
Yeah, sounds like it. So again, just adding guys that are true hitters. I think a lot of times Rays prospect wise, they get a lot of great defensive guys that could plug in at a number of different positions. This guy, I think I've noticed more of an uptick of just finding guys that have mashed at every level in the minor leagues. I think that's refreshing to have a more balanced system, and having a guy like Will Simpson who's not going to, I don't think, ever win a Gold Glove in his career, but a guy that projects to probably get to the majors and hit decently well. I think that's a nice piece to have. But I think the most valuable piece in this trade right now is that competitive balance round A draft selection. That's going to be a top 40 draft selection. It allows the Rays, I think it spreads out or that opens up their draft pool money because they have another pick. So it allows that's a first round pick basically. I think that's worth millions of dollars. And so for the Rays, I think again part of this deal was to move on from Jeffrey Springs' contract, which he signed like right before he got Tommy John surgery. He made 3 starts, I think.
Good for him.
Before he went under the knife. But that I do think has the highest value out of all these things. It might not end up at the end of this thing being worth the most. Will Simpson could end up being a great power hitting corner outfielder or first baseman for you, and you might figure out Joe Boyle and he turns into a great starter. But at the moment of this trade, I think that was probably the most enticing and probably the deal breaker for the Rays, whether or not that was included. I think it's good business for both teams. I think the A's, I laud them for trying to build a team. We can give John Fisher and that organization a lot of crap for how they've handled this. But ultimately, the front office, I think, is still trying to field a winning team. They signed Luis Severino. They bring in Springs. They've got a lot, like guys like Brett Rooker. Like they've got talent on that team, and so I think it's worth noting like they are pushing for something. But ultimately, I think a fair deal for both teams. It's one that could work out for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a fun deal because I think Brett, you're dead on that. I think that draft pick could absolutely be the most valuable thing. I think, I'm most excited about Boyle. I think there's a lot of people that the Rays, front office and analytics interns are saying that, the pitcher in the lower minors, they're like, this guy's a right. I think that's the type of trade. Like, I really think all four pieces of this deal, they're offer something of value. It spreads around the risk a lot more, right? There's a lot of risk in this trade for everybody involved, but I do think it spreads around the risk quite a bit. And I think we said that there needed to be a move. There needed to be a move in the pitching rotation. Now, I think we got to look at, like, what does that leave us with? Because the Rays were kind of busy at the end of we were joking at the end of the last episode about the Rule 5 draft and my noted hating of it and poo-pooing of the Rule 5 draft. But the Rays are pretty active in the Rule 5 draft.
They not only did they pick up a Mets reliever, like, with their own selection, left-handed pitcher Ryan Lavender, after the draft was over. And sometimes this is like pre-organized, like the deal is already in place when the team makes a pick. Come to find out that they had also acquired Mike Vassell, who was with the Mets, but had been selected by, was it Texas? No, Phillies. The Phillies.
The Phillies are the third pick.
A right-handed pitcher. So again, like, interesting decisions to fill out the 40-man roster. And just to remind you, everybody, with these Rule 5 picks, and I'm probably going to botch this, I'm not going to get this perfect, but they either have to remain with the team on the active roster for the entire, they can go on the injured list, but they can't be optioned to AAA.
At least 90 innings.
Yeah,
I think there's an innings limit, so they can't just be like on the injured list the whole time. Yeah, okay. But they have to go so much and then injured list.
Yeah. But they can't be optioned to AAA.
No.
Or they can be offered back to that team. Or if you want to keep the guy and stash him, then you have to, like, work out a trade, or they go through waivers. Then you have to work out a trade. You picked him from.
It's even more complicated because they have to go. So before they get given back to that original team, because this happened with Josh Hamilton, they have to go to waivers. So every other team gets a chance at him. Then, if nobody takes him there, then they have to be offered back to the original team for $50,000. And then at that point, the original team can be like, no, we're good, but we'll make a trade for cash considerations or something.
Right.
And then you would then have the person back.
You owe the team. So if you take, like, the Rays took Lavender directly from the Mets and you owe them like $100,000, I think the Rays have to pay the Mets to, like, get Lavender. And then, so I'm guessing the Phillies had to pay the Mets the $100,000 for Vassell. And then the Rays and Phillies work out that difference as part of whatever trade this is. I think, was it international bonus money that changed hands? I can't remember. That's what it was.
It was small. It was small. These are small deals.
The Rays and Mets pitcher exchange program, though, is alive and well.
It's been pretty one-sided, though. I feel like this is not the great. I guess Phil Maton had
Brooks Raley went over to the Mets.
Yeah.
There's been a fair share of Rays. It's usually like the more veteran pitchers will go from the Rays to the Mets, and then all of the young guys that you've never heard of will go from the Mets to the Rays. So, yeah, interesting. But that does, like, I guess what's more interesting about this is we can talk a little bit about Vassell and Lavender. Lavender had internal brace, which is like, I don't know. Is that like Tommy John light? Like, it's Tommy John. We're calling it something different.
So it's not full surgery. It is an internal surgery, though. You are basically putting in a brace on the ligament rather than replacing the ligament. Is my very, layman knowledge of the surgery, but it has a half the recovery time. So Tommy John is 12 to 18 months. Internal brace is 6 to 9 months, I believe, or 7.
Although, they're saying that Lavender is probably not going to be ready to start the season. He had the surgery back in May, or at least that's when he was hurt. I don't know when he actually.
Right, it might have taken it might have been sometime in June or July, because you try to get second opinions and stuff.
Yeah, which means you can put him on the 60-day IL once spring training starts. So his 40-man spot is not open until camp opens up and you can add players to the 60-man or the 60-day injured list, which will open up a 40-man roster spot. But I think it's just interesting to note that the Rays chose to fill up those spots with these guys. Like, these are valuable spots. It limits what you can do. Now, obviously, if the Rays want to go out and they find another player they want to acquire via trade or another free agent they want to sign, there are some players at the bottom of the 40-man roster that can be moved on, whether that be part of that trade or ultimately DFA'd. And you could also decide, based on who else you acquire the rest of this offseason, actually, never mind on Mike Vassell, or never mind on Nate Lavender. And we want to hold on to him now because we think there can be valuable pieces now. But by the end of the offseason, maybe the roster looks a little different. So from a roster construction standpoint, I was shocked. I was like, okay, we talked about on the last episode what the Rays need to add. They need to add another bat. Maybe there's another reliever they can bring in. And I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting maybe one reliever added at the Rule 5, but to add two and to fill up the 40-man roster, I had to kind of surprised. I don't think, okay, what's the play here? Well, like, are either of these guys good enough to fill up your 40-man roster in the middle of December? And I think the answer is they're filling it now. That doesn't mean these guys are going to be on the opening day roster. I think the Rays like these guys, or they wouldn't have taken them. But they don't have, like, there are other moves that, again, it's not going to just be point A to point B. There are other moves that could be made that make this make a little more sense.
The Lavender pick, I think, is a bit more of that makes a little bit more sense to me. One, because it's the Rays are choosing to spend $100,000, and like, listen, their budget is pretty tight. Like, Stu's pocketbook is pretty limited. So they're choosing to do that. So they're not just like throwing that around willy-nilly. But he's injured, so there is kind of a nice, like, you can like bring him along slowly. So it kind of is almost like one of those like minor league. Yeah, it's like a minor league signing or a training camp invite, like how they kind of did with like Jason Adam and pitchers like that, where you kind of get a chance to, he'll get a longer runway in the minors, like on the rehab assignment. So you can kind of see how he does and then come up during the season. And that's your kind of boost to the back of the pen for a little bit. Try him out. If he doesn't work out, you're all good. When the Rays do take Rule 5 players, especially relievers, it opens your eyes, right? Kevin Kelly was one such, and he's been awesome. And so when the Rays identify interesting relievers, you should take notice. And Lavender has some good stuff. He's a lefty, so that's interesting because that does, Colin Poche is gone, but you still have some lefties like Montgomery and Clevenger still in the pen. So potentially he's a guy that you could see replacing them, or if Clevenger is traded, or as we saw, maybe converted to a starter. Maybe that's where his role goes there. The Vassell trade is a little interesting. It seems more of like a depth reliever, or not reliever, but like swingman type, who's a starter with the Mets. Decent, nothing like eye-popping about any of his stuff. Seems like a guy that you kind of like as depth, but as Rule 5 picks go, like, seems like a hard person to fit on the roster.
Right.
Was the 18th ranked prospect in the Mets organization last year on MLB Pipeline. So he had, the Mets prospects they don't have a great system, but a decent enough prospect, a decent enough pitching prospect. That one's a little bit more surprising, but with it being a trade to the Phillies, I can't imagine that was too much money. So that is definitely a holding a spot until otherwise needed. Though that Mike Vassell and Cole Sulser are like two guys that, like, the Rays added or picked up Cole Sulser's option, and that kind of, it's just a little odd because you have those two, and if you look on Roster Resource, like, they're on the 40-man, and those are those two guys where you're like, okay, you can't option. Cole Sulser has no options, and Mike Vassell, being a Rule 5, can't be optioned either.
Yeah.
So there's no real flexibility on the roster there. So I can't imagine both make it to the regular season. Like,
okay,
I would hope not.
Yeah. There are now, like, we talked about, they went from I guess you could say they went from 7 to 6 like starters, but Joe Boyle, starting pitcher. How will the Rays use him? We don't know yet. Jacob Waguespack, starting pitcher. How will the Rays use him? We don't know yet. Mike Vassell, starting pitcher, has to stay on the active roster, we think. Starting pitcher / swingman. So the Rays have a lot of interesting options. Waguespack is interesting. Boyle, obviously, very interesting. Guys like Ian Seymour and Joe Rock, I think they'll be in AAA. Like they'll be optioned to AAA. You've also got guys like Cole Wilcox. Curette might be in AAA. Like I think your AAA rotation, you've got plenty of options there. But assuming like Joe Boyle is going to start and Mike Vassell is going to play some role, do the Rays need to trade another starting pitcher here?
I don't think they need to, but I would not be shocked to see, especially with the price tag on starting pitchers right now in Major League Baseball. I'm sure they have been asking around about Zach Littell. Like you could have, again, I don't think this is something that also internally, I'd be very curious to see what the Rays see like with Steinbrenner Field and how it is a increase. There's a fantastic article on Baseball Prospectus about basically how that offense will change from Tropicana Field, obviously the Steinbrenner Field, especially for lefties, a little bit more suppression on righties. How does Zach Littell's pitching kind of overlaid into that park effects? Will that crush him? Will that still help him? So I think if the Rays see that as like this is going to be a disastrous park for him, then they definitely move him. I think it's interesting, right? I think we last week said definitely want to move a pitcher. I don't think they're in a spot where they need to move Zach Littell, but you still are in. If Drew Rasmussen is in your starting rotation, which it seems like that is what they want to do, give him that opportunity. You have McClanahan, you have Taj Bradley, you have Ryan Pepio, you have Shane Baz, you have Drew Rasmussen, and then you have Zach Littell, number 6. Maybe you want to do a 6-man rotation early, and you want to give Shane an extra day of rest. You want to give, or McClanahan, I should say, an extra day of rest. Baz probably doesn't need it, but you can then help maybe give Bradley and Baz, who were young pitchers, an extra day of rest. I don't think they have to move them. I think they needed to move one. I don't think they have to move another. It still wouldn't be shocked, though, to see Littell traded. It takes the depth. It makes it a little bit more risky, though, because you mentioned those guys, interesting guys. But if you were having to start Mike Vassell a lot or Jacob Waguespack a lot, you're maybe a little
started a lot. But I think so let's just say let's say you trade Littell. Let's imagine in that universe, right? So that leaves you with McClanahan, Bradley, Pepio, Baz, Rasmussen. That's 5 starters right there. So let's say one of those guys gets hurt. You still have Joe Boyle and Jacob Waguespack. Like Waguespack would still be your 7th option. And I think the Rays really like Jacob Waguespack. He pitched 10 innings, got hurt last year. They kept him around. They tendered him a contract. The Rays clearly like this guy. I don't know. Like it feels like, okay, Joe Boyle, centerpiece of this spring's trade. Are they going to send him to AAA to start the year? Like maybe that's your answer. And you hold on to these pieces. You keep all these guys in AAA. And then when the injuries do happen to, even if you've got a group of 6, like you've got the reinforcements there. And if you go into the season with those top 6 and nobody gets hurt, then I think that's when you toy with the 6-man rotation.
Yeah, and I think if you're not getting a good offer for Littell, you hold, and then you can maybe trade him mid-season or in the season, not even mid-season, right? You could hold him, and then when pitcher injuries happen, teams like, let's do this. Let's do that Littell trade that we were talking about. Let's do it now. I'm ready to pull the trigger. Yeah. But it is. I'm still very curious to see like when the dust settles. Vassell and Sulser just seem like there's not enough flexibility on the pitching. And we talked about this last year, right? Similar type of thing. That lack of flexibility, especially early on, you kind of want to cycle some names. Currently, if I'm looking at the pitching, you have Pete Fairbanks, no options. Edwin Uceda, no options. Garrett Clevenger, no options. Manuel Rodriguez, no options. Mason Montgomery is the other guy in the pen that has options, but that's your second lefty and some of the most filthy stuff. So I think you moved on from Colin Poche because you have Mason Montgomery. So I can't imagine he is going down. And then you have Cole Sulser and you have Mike Vassell, who both have no options. That I wouldn't feel comfortable with that as the pen. So I still think there could be some shuffling to be done. Zach Littell has more value than those other two, so I think you could potentially see we still have quite a bit of offseason left. We've seen some trades, especially around Christmas, that the Rays have been able to pull off. So I still see like Zach Littell as somebody who could make it through and stay on this roster when pitchers and catchers report. But I still think that is a piece that the Rays are calling around, because I think you want to have 5 really locked in starters and then at least 2 more guys that you feel comfortable starting. And I think they do have that even without Littell. I think Boyle, and I don't know how comfortable they have him starting, but I think they will let him be a starter. And I think he is somebody that can start. And I think Waguespack, they do have some comfortability there. And you also have Rock and Seymour, who are on the 40-man roster. They're at the AAA level, even if it's like a spot start.
It looked good in AAA. Yeah, they're like the Jacob Lopez.
Yeah, exactly. And you could see Lopez get some starts. So last year, Lopez didn't even get that much action. And that was
because we stayed healthy.
Less depth. Yeah.
The Rays, for the most part, stayed very healthy last year.
And you hope that's the case. You don't know that. But like, I do think there's a balance between planning for disaster, but over planning. So like if Zach Littell can get you a piece back that can help you right now, like I still am not sure if I'm like trading him for, again, it's what is the return? What is the return? If you're getting the return correctly, then I think you keep him. If not, I think you keep him, and maybe he is a swingman in the pen. Maybe you piggyback him with Rasmussen early on, and you just ditch one of Sulser and Vassell.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels a little disrespectful to Zach Littell. Like, he was the best Rays starting pitcher last year. Like, to turn him into a swingman, and I do think the numbers were real. Like, I think Littell is a very good starting pitcher. But I don't know. It's like you're not doing that with Pepe or Baz or Bradley.
No,
it's going to be the guy that was a reliever going back to being some sort of swingman. So
who has at least more comfortability in the relief.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I just think Zach Littell is going to be traded, because if I'm looking around and I'm seeing the price tag for Alex Cobb, who was basically like, I'm going to retire. And Cleveland was like, here's $15 million. And he's like,
Matthew Boyd's out here getting paid. Like
Matthew Boyd getting $18 million. I mean, Severino getting 3-year deals.
Yeah.
Like Zach Littell is sitting there at like what, $4.5 million? Like, he is better than your 4th or 5th starter for most teams. That's like an 80% statement right there.
Right.
So I would be surprised if a team doesn't go out and get him. I mean, heck, if you're the Mariners, where's like, you could trade Brian Wu or Bryce Miller for a piece, and then make a smaller trade for like Zach Littell to like backfill. Or if you're the Angels, right? Like,
yeah, I'm looking at
Angels could use them.
Kyle Hendricks and Reed Detmers in the back end of the Angels rotation right now. I know Hendricks signed as a free agent. It was a small deal, like 1 year, $2.5 million. Like, you could move Kyle Hendricks to your.
Hendricks could be your pen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can be the swingman.
Reed Detmers has had an up and down career. with the Angels. And we've talked about some Angels bats. Like maybe the Littell trade could be more of a 1-for-1. Or maybe not 1-for-1. Like, are you getting a Taylor Ward in a Zach Littell deal? Like, is that something? Or is there a more interesting deal that like maybe Joe Adell is a part of?
Oh, yeah.
That's Angels, not 1-for-1.
I can't imagine. I just don't know what the Angels. I have no idea what the Angels are doing. That's an evergreen statement, and so I'm definitely calling them and being like, what do you guys want? But like Zach Littell would be a great upgrade right there for them.
Mm-hmm.
So
a team that wants to be back in the postseason discussion.
Yeah. So I think there's real value there. I think there's extreme value there. I think the Mets are still looking for another piece.
The Rangers,
another pitching. The Rangers could always be looking for another piece. They also have a lot of injury, like risk in their rotation. The Marlins, if they trade Luzardo, they've been like shopping arms, so I could see Pete Bendix doing a trade.
Well, I don't know. Like, Gabe Kapler's in that front office. I don't know if Zach Littell they're going to be trading for. Although I think that's water under the bridge.
We'll see. He's in the front office. He's on the field, so maybe not. Yeah, that's a good point.
Not the.
They need that spark.
They need
that energy. Yeah, Littell, I think without the beard would not do well. So I think for his own career sake.
Yeah.
We're gonna see what Devin Williams. I don't know. Devin Williams without the beard. Suddenly, I'm not as intimidated by him.
He might.
The changeup looks good, but we'll see.
But yeah, I mean, and again, we're talking about just Littell. Like, did you see any of the other like that would be a pretty massive deal, I think, for the Rays to move any of their other starters.
Like we said last time, like if it's like a Shane Baz, it's a mega deal, right? Yeah. It is like I still say it, like a Shane Baz for Evan Carter is like would be a fun challenge trade for both teams,
right?
Like that would be it would be a bold trade. So yeah, I don't know. I would be surprised if Zach. I still just think Zach Littell, the price tag for pitchers that are at his level or worse, just makes me think somebody is going to offer something pretty nice to be able to add Zach Littell to their rotation. And if you're the Rays, I mean, I think like you have okay, if you lose your best pitchers, you still have guys that can like hold it down. If you're losing
losing Darby again.
Oh, Emma.
Nope, you're back.
Okay. So that one of the things that I just want to just say before we move on is if you're losing your top pitchers anyway, like if you're like McClanahan's or Bradley or Pepios are going down for long term, I don't think like you.
Okay. Might have to step in for Darby here. Oh, you're in and out, but you're back again.
Okay, weird. My internet's been like.
Okay, you're losing Pepiot or Bradley for long term.
You're probably not competing. You're probably not competing anyway. 100%. So I don't think Zach Littell is like preventing you from, there's emergency and like he can help like fill the gap, but I don't think he's like, okay, we can still compete for the World Series, even though we're missing McClanahan and Bradley. Like, I think you need those guys to succeed. So.
Well, look at this. I think we're going to come in at under an hour this week. It's been a while since we've done that. We've been posting over an hour pretty consistently.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And today there was a lot big trade. I mean, Jeffrey Springs was a pitcher you signed to an extension a few years ago. You really turned him into just a really good left-handed starting pitcher. A guy that when the Rays made that trade, right, like you traded Ronaldo Hernandez, who, again, catchers, prospects, like who knows, right? Roll the dice. But Ronaldo Hernandez was seen as like your future catcher. And now I don't think he's played a little bit in the big leagues. I don't even know where he's at now. But you
That
traded
was
him to the Red Sox, to an in-division rival, for two pitchers that they had just DFA'd, right? And you ultimately win that trade by a lot.
And Chris Mazza gave him some pretty solid, like he didn't have a great Rays stint, but he gave him some very important like swing innings.
Yeah.
He absorbed he had to eat some really big pile of bad innings, but like those are valuable stuff. So like Chris Mazza was a useful piece. And Jeffrey Springs turned into one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball for like a short, brief period, which kind of wild. It was a lopsided trade, but not in the way that Rays fans thought at the time.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Raise Your Voice. Thank you guys for listening. We are entering the holidays. I don't believe we'll have an episode out next week, but we'll try to get something out to you guys before the new year. Like Darby said, there's still potential for more moves to be made before January 1. So we'll be back with you guys in the next couple of weeks to get you some more stuff. We've got a lot still to get through this off season, but thank you guys for listening. We are live on youtube.com/@raiseyourvoice for every episode. So if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you can join us every time we go live. We're still available wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, make sure to head on over to draysbay.com to check out all the great Rays coverage. If you really want to say thank you, patreon.com/raiseyourvoice. You can become a member for as little as $1 a month. Once again, thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you next week.